Hi, third graders. Hi, friends. Welcome back to our read aloud of Tomorrow Girls Behind the Gates. We are getting towards the end. Whew, my goodness. When we finished chapter 13, the girls had come back from their overnight trip. They're having dinner and they can't seem to find Evelyn. They don't know where she's at. And while Maddie and Louisa are eating, Emuel comes over to them and says that Mrs. Brewster wants to meet with them when they're done eating. So instantly the girls are like, we're done eating, because now they had to know what was going on. So chapter 14. The first thing I noticed when Maddie and I arrived at Mrs. Brewster's high-ceilinged office with its bank of tall windows is that Evelyn is not there either. I'd hoped that she had been summoned here since she was a part of our group. I started to really get worried about her. Mrs. Brewster sits behind her big wooden desk and she is not smiling. My mind shifts from Evelyn and begins to race a mile a minute, practicing different ways to smooth all this over. We couldn't just leave the boys lost and alone in the woods. What if they would have died? It was the good for our team. We found something to eat, didn't we? We were demonstrating resourcefulness. This was a quality that our outdoor skill teacher always stressed. It seemed that with all these arguments in my head, I was about to honestly have something true and valid. Sit, please, Mrs. Brewster requested, nodding towards two low, straight-back chairs across from her desk. I sat, my shoulders were back and alert, ready to make my point. Cutting my eyes to Maddie, I noticed that her right leg was jiggling anxiously. I was surprised and just a little happy to see this. It meant, and I figured, that she doesn't want to be sent home. If she wants to stay, then she's going to put in full effort that's required to convince Mrs. Brewster that neither of us did anything wrong. Mrs. Brewster, this really was not our fault, I began. Did I give you permission to speak, Miss Ballinger? Mrs. Brewster questioned coldly. No, ma'am, I admit. Then do not speak, Mrs. Brewster said. Yes, ma'am. Admittedly, this was not really off to a great start. Moments of silence passed. Are we waiting for Evelyn? We must be. Oh, I'm sure Evelyn will be here any minute, I say impulsively, forgetting about the whole do not speak thing in my panic. Mrs. Brewster's eyebrows shot up and her nostrils flared open, and her blue eyes were burning into me. Sorry, I say, realizing my error. I'm sorry. Another few minutes passed, and finally the office door opened. But Devi, not Evelyn, entered. She was holding a stack of papers that she placed on the desk in front of Mrs. Brewster. Suddenly, a whole new worry takes a hold of me. What if this is about Evelyn? Has something awful happened to her? Miss Ballinger, Madeline, Mrs. Brewster begins. Devi has been reviewing the identity bracelets that we collected, and she now has informed me that yours does not check out. My throat instantly dries up like sandpaper. By the end of the first week, I had just assumed that we were safe on that score. I almost had forgotten about it. Really? That's odd, Maddie bluffed like a champ. What's the problem? I'm astonished by her coolness, and I hope that my astonishment doesn't show. Mrs. Brewster leaned forward, and her elbows were now on her desk, and her hands were locked together. When we scanned your ID bracelet, 2 numbers came up. One code set traces to Madeline Ballinger, and the second code comes up with a different number that belongs to a Madeline Fry. Do you know anyone by that name? Maddie starts to shake her head. She turns to me. We don't know anyone by that name, do we, sis? I had never guessed that she was capable of this kind of calm demeanor. If they still were giving out Academy Awards for acting, Maddie would definitely win one. She's never called me sis before, but it sounds totally natural. No, I can't think of anyone that name. I was grateful that my voice didn't crack, and I was hoping that my acting was half as good as hers. Maddie turned back to Mrs. Brewster and Devi, and her face was all wide-eyed and innocent, and just shrugged. I feel like I might vomit. Mrs. Brewster's eyes narrow and seem to somehow grow brighter. They dart now between Maddie and I, back and forth. She was sizing us up suspiciously, taking our measure, deciding if we were lying. I just kept thinking about swimming, anything to keep my face calm and neutral. I see myself in a pool, looking down through the aqua water in the cool blue tiled bottom. I'm breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Devi, at this time, please escort Madeline Ballinger or Fry, whichever it is, to the isolation quarters immediately. Please, Mrs. Brewster instructed. Maddie looked at me, and for the first time, panic flashed in her eyes. I hope Mrs. Brewster did not get a glimpse of it. Maddie must sense that she's possibly given herself away, because now she ducked her head down. A quick moment later, she then lifted up once more, and she was cool again. "Do I really have to go to these quarters?" she asked. "I've never slept away from my sister before, and the thought of it just truly scares me." "Ooh, nice save, Maddie," I think with deep admiration. "It's true," I say, "never part. I won't sleep at all tonight if she's not there." Mrs. Brewster shook her head firmly. "I can't give the two of you the opportunity to coordinate your story?" "What story?" Maddie asked, with a convincing tone. "If you're telling a story," Debbie allowed in a more kindly tone. "We're not," I insisted. "We don't know how this happened. This is not our fault." Mrs. Brewster now looked at me sharply. "What did you think was going to be talked about when you first came in here, Miss Ballinger?" she said pointedly. Now I'm angry at myself for using the same sentence, "it's not our fault," a second time. I know that that's what reminded her of what I said earlier. I sure hope I can be as cool and quick as Maddie has been, but I don't know if I can come up with a lie quick enough. So I stick with the facts. "Well, we met some boys on our overnight camping trip, and we accepted sandwiches from them, and they've gotten lost, so we helped them find their way back. And I know we're not supposed to have contact with them, but it seemed just like the right thing to do at the time. I was gambling with telling the truth. I came across with honesty." To my total amazement, Mrs. Brewster started to smile. I've never seen her do that before. Honestly, it didn't even look that natural on her. The smile actually looked kind of scary. "Well, life does throw some unexpected things at us," the headmistress said. "Adaptability is key." "Yes, I agree," cautiously. "Emuel always tells us that in class." "I taught it to her," Mrs. Brewster then resumes, her former stern expression. "You ladies will just have to adjust to being apart tonight. That is all. You both are dismissed." Now Maddie is unable to conceal the alarm on her face as Debbie takes her arm and hurries her out of the room. Mrs. Brewster waits for me at the door, and once I am in the hall, takes her keys and locks it. "Straight to your room, Miss Ballinger. It is almost 7:30. And with that, she heads away from me, moving down the hall at a brisk walk. I was left standing there alone, hardly believing what's happened. I let everything rewind in my head, reviewing what was said, trying to make sense of it. The guy Mom and Dad hired to alter Maddie's bracelet hadn't done the job correctly. Still a shadow of her old code was in her bracelet. If CMS uncovered the truth, then I would be in trouble too. I've been claiming Maddie as my twin sister all this time. Maddie would be sent home, and so would I. And that brings us to tomorrow's chapter, which is chapter 15. Maybe we'll learn more about where Maddie's being sent off to in the isolation quarters. Yikes. All right, third graders and my other friends, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again tomorrow.